Real Turkey channel. This is Atilla Yesilada recording another midnight video with the help of his throat lozenges. Okay, this title is President Erdogan crashes the Turkish Lira. Can it recover? Now, Turkish politics started the slump in Turkish assets, and Turkish politics is not going to recover. Things are going to get much worse from here. And I will describe what here is. Turkish economy probably headed for a sharp recession as of the second quarter, but probably it will be brief. With the caveat of very low probability, extreme political events. On the other hand, I expect Turkish markets to recover at most within a month. I am 90% confidence that whether we're talking about the exchange rate, the bonds, or Turkish equities, they will have gained value between now and say June. Okay. First of all, I need to describe the political situation, how this whole mess started. Though, if you are a follower of this channel, you will see what Mr. Erdogan is doing to almost willingly cause unrest and mayhem. Then I have to make predictions about how bad it will get. 3, the impact on the economy. 4, the connection between political risk and market risk. And then, of course, my conclusions. Turkish politics have been in disequilibrium since main opposition parties swept local elections on 31st of March 2025. Currently, roughly 70% of the population lives in localities which are governed by CHP mayors. Mr. Erdogan is currently a lame duck. He is no longer eligible to run for the next presidential contest scheduled for May 2028. But he wants to become president for life. Honestly, this is not a subjective view. He said that. He said, as long as God gives me life and my nation wants me, I shall serve you. Well, may he live for 10,000 years. So, to bypass the restriction on two-time term limit, there are two ways: a new constitution and early elections called by the parliament. So Mr. Erdogan either arranging a new constitution with the votes of pro-Kurdish rights DEM party, or negotiating for an early election vote in the Turkish Grand Assembly with the main opposition CHP and its leader Özgür Özel, are the possible venues, and everyone expects Mr. Erdogan to work on these two aspects. Unfortunately, there is a shortcut way, a simple, efficient way to do so, which is to give Kurds, what they want, which is equal citizenship, and end to discrimination and release of political prisoners, or to settle for CHP's conditions for the timing of early elections. CHP demands that early elections be held this November, but I'm fairly sure what they want is more social spending. With some give and take, Erdogan and CHP can arrange elections within the first half of 2026. But Mr. Erdogan is a risk taker. He wants to take it all. So this is not how he approaches the situation. Instead of directly negotiating with them, he wants the terror organization PKK to abolish itself and Syrian Kurds to abandon political struggle and completely merge with the national government in Damascus. So this has become a very convoluted process, and Erdogan has to jump through several hoops to even get to start negotiating on a new constitution. And he is very unlikely to part with his immense executive privileges to give Kurds what they want so they would vote for a new constitution. Early elections, he doesn't want them. Well, he does actually. He wants early elections a couple of months before the regularly scheduled elections, which is good enough for the election authority. He will not only serve at least 4.5 years of his 5 year term, but get a chance to win another one. To win another one is the key word here because according to February and March polls, he is lagging badly behind his two CHP rivals, namely Mr. Ekrem İmamoğlu, the Istanbul mayor, and Mr. Mansur Yavaş, the Ankara mayor. So Erdogan also added to his objectives to remove these obstacles from his path. In fact, he wants to go further. He wants to paralyze CHP so it won't be able to press for elections for the next 2 years. And this is how the whole thing started. First, Ekrem İmamoğlu was arrested on charges of organized fraud as well as supporting the terror organization PKK. As of yesterday, he is no longer the mayor of Istanbul. He is in prison, but he will be replaced by a CHP member of the municipal assembly. So, Erdogan gained some but lost more. On Monday, we found out that a probe has been launched into financial affairs of Ankara municipality for frivolous spending on public concerts. This doesn't directly concern the mayor of Ankara. I should slow down. I get overexcited when I do these videos. The current investigation doesn't target Mansur Yavaş, but this is how plots start in Turkey. You start from bottom up. You build up a case slowly, and eventually, of course, Mansur Yavaş will also be implicated and potentially removed from his post. His idea of paralyzing CHP is even more clever. It's genius, evil genius, but genius. Essentially, he has arranged with rebels in CHP to have the previous Grand Convention repealed on charges of delegates being bribed by Ekrem İmamoğlu and the current chairman. If the courts agree that there has been improprieties in the Grand Convention, they will be annulled and the party will be turned over to a court-appointed trustee until it can arrange new elections, all the way from, rural straw polls to national preliminaries and then the convention, which will take at least a year and a half, during which, according to the law, CHP is not eligible to participate in elections. So this is the convoluted plan Mr. Erdogan has concocted to achieve his goal of regain eligibility. Of course, there are always unintended consequences. This is sort of a condition for life. Ekrem İmamoğlu's arrest didn't go too well with the people of Turkey. Now, mind you, not only CHP, but the people of Turkey. CHP arranged a preliminary on Sunday, even though Ekrem İmamoğlu was the only candidate to become the presidential nominee. And it was an open preliminary, meaning that not only CHP members, but anyone with an ID can vote. And 15 million people turned up to vote for İmamoğlu. CHP's membership is 1.7 million. Essentially, a simple procedural arrangement to declare Mr. İmamoğlu CHP's presidential nominee turned into a referendum on Erdogan's oppressive policies, and he lost badly. 15 million is huge. I think Turkey has a total of 56 million registered voters, and I don't think CHP has ever attracted 20 million votes. Moreover, and more frighteningly for Turkey. People rebelled against Erdogan, trying to end competitive democracy in Turkey. Protests started small, then CHP chairman Özel decided to lead the cause, inviting people to protest on the streets. And tonight, Monday, it's midnight, and for the third day in a row, roughly 500,000 people, just based on my, guessing of the drone coverage, are currently in front of the city hall in Saraçhane Square of Istanbul, protesting Erdogan's policies. Erdogan tolerated this protests for a couple of days, and today coercion and excessive use of police force started. You can just check any Turkey videos in Google search or whatever search engine you are using. There are really very disturbing scenes of police beating the hell out of, unarmed and innocent civilians. Moreover, down raids started. Journalists, politicians, business people, college students have been arrested en masse. As of Monday morning, according to official Ministry of Interior records, 1,200 people were arrested. The number is escalating rapidly. So Mr. Erdogan managed to get Ekrem İmamoğlu out of his way, but he got stuck with a bigger problem. What to do if protesters don't go home? And that's where we start transitioning to the economy. Now, protests will continue, I'm 100% certain, between now and Friday. On Saturday, the entire Muslim world starts observing the religious holiday of Eid of Ramadan, I suppose. So there's a 4-day break. People return to work on Wednesday. That's sort of like a circuit breaker for everyone to put on their thinking caps and ask the question, where the hell are we going? Why are we doing this? Okay? So maybe Erdogan will back down from his maximalist approach to gaining everything on politics. Very unlikely. Erdogan doesn't back down, he doubles up. Or protesters will realize that police may soon start shooting people indiscriminately, or they may be detected via, monitoring cams all over the city, lose their jobs, lose their titles, or even put in prison, and decide enough is enough, and they go home. In this scenario, minimal damage on the economy, simply because when the turmoil started, Turkish Lira dropped by 10% versus the dollar, which will immediately pass through to inflation. If dollar TL remains at its current value of roughly 38 liras to a dollar, the pass-through to inflation would be anywhere from 3 percentage points to 5 percentage points within a year. So nobody ever believed central bank's year-end inflation target anyhow, but add another 2-3% on top of that, and then you get a picture where monetary loosening is no longer possible. So even in this good case scenario of street protests fading away in a week or 10 days, it is very unlikely that central bank will cut rates in its 17th of April meeting. If it does, people will perceive that as central bank now being governed by Mr. Erdogan directly, and may lose confidence in their Turkish lira assets, switching their savings to FX deposits, which would add to the pressure on the currency. Central bank will defend the currency, but investor and consumer sentiment, business sentiment will go down, and that's where, a recession starts. Do I think that protests will continue after the Eid holiday? I doubt it. Um, as I've said, the threat of being shot by police is very real in Turkey. The police enjoys complete impunity. The threat of losing their jobs is very scary at a time when the cost of living crisis erodes disposable incomes maybe for 80% of the population. I don't think Turks are any more timid or brave than any other nation, but the cost of protesting on the streets is so high in Turkey that I don't think people will persist in these street marches. As importantly, we really don't have a tradition in this Occupy type of movements. I mean, remember Iran, where a poor Kurdish girl was taken to custody and then beaten mercilessly and died, and Iran, a country which by most definitions is even more oppressive than Turkey, erupted for a year. Okay? Or, remember Arab Spring, anything like that. Turkey does, or the French and the Greek who spend most of their time on the streets protesting one thing or other. Bless them. I wish we were a country like that, but we aren't. But Turkey's only experience with this type of long, large scale, and persistent street demonstrations was in 2013, the infamous Gezi uprising, which ended in Erdogan's victory. And millions of young people simply just, dropping out of the official system, either migrating if they have a skill to another country, or just taking gig jobs, or completely losing interest in politics. So, more likely than not, street protests will end. Central bank will delay rate cuts for a month or two. We will have a small bump in inflation, perhaps a slowdown in the economy. But hey, then summer is coming. Tourism trade is expected to be buoyant again this year, even though Turkey is expensive for tourists vis-a-vis Egypt and other locations like Greece. Early reservations are picking up. I don't want to talk much about the tourism season, but remember that the Greek island of Santorini may be hit by an earthquake, and Santorini, the tourists are flocking to Turkey. Um, so, why do I think? I'm sorry, what if protests continue? Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. It's a possibility. I don't think it's a high possibility, but you never know. Erdogan clearly has chosen to engage in a test of wills between the opposition and the streets and himself. And I don't think he's very rational at this point. So he could really aggravate anger. A, he could immediately go after the Ankara mayor. B, uh, mass arrests start. C, court rules that CHP's Grand Convention was illegal and the party is turned over to a trustee. All of these things will infuriate Turks of all political stripes, and they may stay on the streets. Another possibility is that, look, Turkey is suffering from unprecedentedly rapid degree of deterioration in income equality, and Kurds are very angry that this peace process between Erdogan and the Dem party is not going anywhere, so they may join the protests. Turkey has 16 million retirees, at least 8 million of them are in poverty. Roughly 40% of the population, of the working population, makes a living at or around the minimum wage, which is barely enough to feed a family of four. If these demonstrations continue after the Eid, I'm 100% sure Erdogan would order the police to use any means necessary to send people home. That means bloodshed or very ugly scenes on the streets. There might be curfews. Colleges may be sent on recess until unrest calms down. All of these things will have a very negative effect on economic confidence, either for businesses or consumers. We could have a sudden stop in terms of household consumption or business capex, and Turkey enters a recession. Or, in the case that protests continue, he can give leeway to the central bank to raise interest rates to make Turkish assets attractive once again to stop a run on TL deposits, which will also be recessionary. Pretty bleak picture, isn't it? I mean, geez, who would invest in Turkey? Why would anyone hold Turkish liras at a point like that? Well, first of all, the central bank has ample reserves to defend the exchange rate at a level it desires for at least another 6 months, if not 12. I'm not going to go into technical details, but most of foreign financial investors have bailed out immediately. There's maybe 10, $15 billion of foreign financial investment left in Turkey. There is another $30 billion in FX protected deposit scheme and another $40 million in very liquid money market funds, all of which are volatile liabilities of the banking system that can, at the drop of a hat, migrate to FX. Central bank can pay all of these demands on its coffers and still comfortably have roughly $60 billion of reserves. Moreover, it doesn't matter to the central bank's ability to keep the exchange rate at a level it so desires, as long as people keep their money in the banks. They switch from Turkish lira assets to dollars or euros. Banks have excess FX deposits, which they swap to central bank to obtain liras. Central bank's reserves are replenished. It continues to intervene in the currency market to stabilize the currency. Secondly, the tourism season. In Turkey, Turkey's import bill goes down simply because there is, less demand for heating. Industrial activity seasonally slows down, and oil prices are going down as we speak. On the other hand, of course, it is estimated that in a regular year, tourist trade makes up roughly 4% of gross domestic product. So that provides a tremendous boost to economic activity as well as replenishing the FX reserves of the central bank. This essentially is my argument that both high net worth individuals, which drive the demand for TL assets, foreign investors, and Turkey's foreign lenders will see that even though the mood music coming out of Ankara is terrible, cacophonic, and people are on the streets, there is really no way the Turkish central bank can lose control of the currency. Now, once again, central bankers lie or remain ambiguous. It's constructive ambiguity. But according to official press reports, both the economies are Mehmet Şimşek and the two governors of the Central Bank of Turkey, Mr. Fatih Karahan and Professor Cevdet Akçay, have met with banks and businesses over the weekend and assured them that if it takes an interest rate hike to stabilize the currency, they will not hesitate to do so. Of course, at the end, Erdogan decides whether they can or cannot raise interest rates, but at least on the face of it, the rhetoric is very positive. If you ask my personal opinion, I think Erdogan has gotten over his aversion to low interest rates. He understands that even his Islamist voters don't care much about the level of interest rates. They are more interested in currency stability. So I don't think he will object too loudly if the central bank raises interest rates. There is another question mark about this whole theory or scenario that I constructed, which is uh, they are recessionary. Even if tourist trade is good, if central bank raises interest rates, that would trump the positive effect of tourism revenues, and Turkey will suffer a recession. Erdogan has always prioritized growth over low inflation. Can he fire Şimşek? At this point, there is no trust in the investment community or among Turkish savers about Erdogan's policy, so this is a possibility. But today, after the cabinet meeting, he came out strongly supporting Mehmet Şimşek and his economic stabilization program, quote unquote. So I don't think a recession or a slowdown in economic growth would be cause enough for him to fire Mehmet Şimşek. Moreover, I don't think Erdogan really cares about growth per se. It's employment and its ability to channel funds to his cronies, both of which are safe. As everywhere else in the world, Turkish businesses are hoarding labor, and he can always use the state banks to fund his mega projects and the beneficiaries of the crony business people. So, I mean, I don't want to sound positive, optimistic, or I don't want to come across as I'm recommending an investment in any kind of Turkish asset, including real estate, but trying to be as objective as possible, as a card carrying dissident, I see very low risks to Turkish assets. And of course, there's a upside, assuming street protests wind down or continue without violence. Uh, Markets will soon focus on positives. American media reported that President Trump is thinking of re-inviting Turkey to the F-35 jet fighter program. Also news that Trump will invite Erdogan to White House in April. They're doing very well as far as their relationship goes. Um, so what we call optics of Turkish politics will improve. Your average global fund doesn't really care much about human rights violations for the right reasons. It's paid to take risk. But at a time like this, when Trump threatens and intimidates everyone, a good relationship between a country's leader and Trump is a bonus. It's sort of, an insurance policy for your investments in Turkey. It's less likely, much less likely, but possible that at some point Europe will realize that if it really wants to stand up to Russia, it must gain the friendship of Turkey. If Turkey officially sides with Russia in terms of sending armaments or whatever, it would be much more difficult to stop Putin's expansionist aims. So it's possible, but not very probable that at some point, to gain the friendship of Turkey, EU will offer what Mr. Erdogan covets most, which is a new customs union agreement, which would boost trade and finally FDI. Once again, I'm not pitching Turkey to you. I'm simply trying to balance the negatives and positives. My conclusion is that politics, very negative, economy, definitely not positive, but markets, yeah, probably more of an upside than downside. This has been another video by Real Turkey channel presented by Atilla Yesilada. I am extremely grateful for your comments, whether you are trolling me or praising my efforts. Please keep writing them, and if you like this broadcast, subscribe and hit the like button. Have a good day.